All right, welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel on this bright January 20th here, 2025. I know a lot of you are probably waking up to a lot of cold temperatures. And today I have a guest who can try to help understand why we are seeing these cold temperatures and what it all means. I'd like to introduce to everyone this morning, we have our special guest, David Dilley, Professor David Dilley. How you doing today, David?
I'm doing well, and hopefully everyone out there in the audience is doing well, and you also, Jake.
Definitely a little chilly this morning, like I said, but that is to be expected here in the Northeast. But what wasn't expected was how cold some of these temperatures are getting across the northern plain states. I just read about a negative 35 to negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit for
Mm,
temperatures in the northern plains, 20th into the 21st. So some pretty cold stuff out there right now.
well, it's going to be expected. They're going to have to start getting used to it pretty soon.
Yeah, that's what our guest last night, Lee Wilbarger, was talking about as well. So he's more of a bit of the solar cycles expert, but you bring a little more to the table than just solar cycles. In fact, you're going to show us quite a bit of cycles, aren't you?
We are going to walk through a lot of cycles, carbon dioxide cycles, the electromagnetic gravitational cycles, solar cycles, ocean cycles, and tie it all in at the end.
Perfect. All right, so the floor is yours. I understand you have some stuff that you'd like to show us as well. David's got a PowerPoint here for us, so here we go.
Yes, to hello everyone out there that's watching the video. I have a lot of information to show you, and I am Professor David Dilley, Global Weather Oscillations Incorporated, specializing in climate pulse technology that I developed right here. And you can get on our websites either through globalweatheroscillations.com, that's our principal site, or globalweathercycles.com. That's a little bit easier to remember. I am a former meteorologist from the National Weather Service, NOAA, and the United States Air Force. Now I'm a senior researcher, meteorologist, climatologist here at Global Weather. 50 years of experience. And not sure how I got that. I'm only 25 years old. Anyway, I am a working partner of the International Hurricane Protection Association. And here at GWO, I created climate pulse technology, and it is based on proven science, the Milankovitch cycles, subset cycles of it. And it's all proven science. It is essentially electromagnetic interactions between the Earth, Moon, Sun, and also solar cycles. Here at GWO, we specialize in hurricane landfall predictions. We predict the landfalls. I have 13 zone predictions from the United States down through the Azores, not Azores, but the Lesser Antilles. And we put out the forecast about 5 months before the season even begins, pinpointing where the landfalls are going to be, based on natural cycles, of course. And we also do El Nino predictions 2 years in advance, and of course, our climate change research and predictions. And on our website have 4+ climate videos, pretty much their podcast videos, such as this one here. Now, what we've been told is global warming never occurred prior to 1850. That's pretty much what the media is saying. We've never had this before. And the thing is, was it caused by the burning of fossil fuels and that increased atmospheric carbon dioxide? We're going to look at all that. Or is it a recurring natural cycle? Well, my helper, very smart helper here on beside me, As we study what's going on, my helper says, my instinct says, use common sense.
There we go.
And this is what we're going to show, common sense. And in the common sense, one question to ask is today's climate change science essentially political science to achieve agendas? This is one reason they don't want you to know that we've had prior global warming cycles. Well, lo and behold, look at this. Number one, back in 990 to about 1100 AD, global warming, number one in this century or during the past 1100 years. Global warming cycle number one. And there's a global cooling cycle. There's global warming cycle number two. Wow, we've had two of them. There's number three, back around 1300 AD. Global warming cycle number four. Global warming cycle number five. And our current global warming cycle that we're in right now, number six. Again, about 1925, and it's right up through 2024. So we've had six global warming cycles during the past 1100 years, and we've had five global cooling cycles, and we're looking for number six. And we will show that a little bit later on. Okay, part one, I have about 6 parts in the presentation. How global warming temperatures, or global temperatures, I should say, are calculated by NOAA and Climate Prediction Center. Well, one thing that they do is they take the temperatures of the oceans and the land areas around the world, but the oceans cover 71% of the Earth. So that has a big bearing on what the temperature is actually going to be. In this, what I'm showing here, this is January 2024, about a year ago, record cold in the Antarctic. Rest of the area is pretty warm, pretty warm. So global temperature anomalies, above or below average, incorporate 29% of the Earth's surface is land, 71% is oceans. And this is January 2025, showing all the ocean water temperatures, anomalies above or below normal. The blue in the center there, along the equator in the Pacific, the blue means it's cooler than normal. We have a La Nina occurring, and we're going to talk about it, La Nina, what that does.
Okay.
But the rest of the oceans are pretty warm. The orange to red, the red area is extremely warm. So you can see the oceans are pretty darn warm. And that's one reason why 2024 was the warmest year on record. Because what they do is they add all the ocean temperatures to the land temperatures, average it out, and this is the graphic they come out with. That it actually warms up the land areas, makes it look even warmer than it really was. And this is going to be a big problem for NOAA and the Climate Prediction Center down the road, right around 2030. And I'm going to show you why a little bit later on in the presentation. They're going to be in big trouble. Part two, climate change cycles. Going to take a look at the warmest year on record, 2023 through 2024. Earth's natural climate pulse. The Earth, Moon, Sun. Proven science. This is all proven. Interactions between the Earth, Moon, Sun. So essentially what we have is, there's the Sun in the middle, the Earth. As the Earth moves around the Sun, it's an elliptical path where it swings in closer to the Sun every January. That's the closest approach to the Sun. But the overall path changes over the course of time. About every 18 to 60,000 years, we swing out further away from the Sun, thus cooling us down. We enter a glacial period.
Right.
That's what we do. And at the same time, the tilt axis of the Earth changes from 22.1 to 24.5 degrees. Degrees. That's every 41,000 years. So when you hit the peak of a glacial period, what happens is the axis is up straighter, up only 22-degree tilt. So the Arctic, northern part of the world, southern part of the Antarctic, is has less sunshine. It's colder. That's why you go into glacial periods. Now, we as humans require sleep, a good night's sleep, or else we do not function very well. Earth is the same way. It needs long periods of rest, or it does not function well. And this is what happens on our glacial periods and global interglacial warm periods that I showed on the graphic on our path around the sun. Here's a nice long global interglacial warm period back 425,000 years, when we went into a long, deep glacial period, warmed up again 325,000 years ago, 225,000 years ago, 150,000 years ago, and this is today. This is today. We came out of the glacial period 8,000 years ago, and we are at the warm peak of the interglacial warm period. We are supposed to be warm now.
Right.
Not cold. We are supposed to be warm. This is a natural cycle. And as the Earth comes out of the glacial period, this was 10,000 years ago, the blue here means that's the glacial period, came out of the glacial period 7,000 years ago, it was very warm, warmer than today. And this is another cycle. The interglacial and glacial periods cycles are about every 120,000 years. And these are about 1,100-year cycles. Very warm back 7,000 years ago, cooled down 4,000 years ago. And you can see we're on a cooling trend since we came out of the peak of the warm period 7,000 years ago. And here we are over on the right. This is another cyclical warm period that comes every 1,100 years. So we're supposed to be warm. This is another cycle where we are supposed to be warm. It's not caused by human activity. Now, sometimes we require an afternoon rest period. If we've had a hectic period in our life and we're a little tired, take a little nap for a while, snooze. Well, the Earth also requires naps, or it does not function well. So we go into shorter cycles on this. Here's the moon. And at this point, it's at the furthest point from the Earth, called the apogee. When it's at the apogee, it has a lower amount of gravitational pull. And these cycles occur as the moon makes its cycle around the Earth. It comes in, and it's also an elliptical path, just like the Earth around the sun. So when it is closest approach to the Earth, this occurs every month, once a month, and even closer approaches on other cycles every year, 4 years, and 9 years, 18 years. These are all cyclical. So when the moon is in closer to the Earth, and this is why you get your big full moon during a month, and the ocean tides are higher. That's because gravitational pull is increased by 30 to 40%. That's big. Now, when it's in alignment with the sun, this is called a perigee syzygy. That even provides more gravitational pull, increased up to 44 to 47%. That is huge.
Yeah.
And this is why you have coastal flooding sometimes along the coastal areas without a storm. That's when this cycle occurs. And here is the new moon. It goes on 4-year cycles, comes down to 28 degrees below the equator, about 28 degrees above the equator. New moon on the left does the same. The new moon can be just as strong as the full moon. Acts like a plunger, pulling and tugging at the oceans and atmosphere. And these strong gravitational cycles expand and contract the outer core of the Earth. The outer core of the Earth can bulge by 1.5 kilometers. Then you can get slippage of the plates. You can have increased earthquake, volcanic activity. And again, I mentioned a lot of the different cycles of the gravitational cycles where you have your 12-hour tides. In the ocean, high tides twice a day, every 12 hours. That's the new moon and full moon. The new moon and regular moon. And also cycles go out 4 years, 9 years, 18 years. And there's a big 72-year cycle, and we're going to really talk about the 200 to 230-year strong gravitational cycle. We've already discussed the 1200-year one. So this is what the 1200-year electromagnetic gravitational cycles look like, and the strength of them. You can see a sinusoidal curve, and strongest, again, when I showed you the global warming cycles, it was very warm back around 900 AD, and the global warming cycles were less until we got to this one today. And that's because the gravitational cycles kind of correspond to this.
Yeah, I want to interject real quick. This cycle
Yes.
looks a lot like the global warming cycles that you were showing us, like you just said, from 900 AD and moving forward, almost identical when you look
Just
at these.
about.
Yeah,
And this is what I'm going to
yeah.
do. I'm going to overlay it. There's
Jeez.
our global warming cycles, and you overlay it, and there you are. This is what controls the global warming cycles and global cooling cycles. As I indicated, we've had 6 global warming cycles since 850 AD, and we've had 5 global cooling cycles, looking for number 6. And we can't stop it. It will come. It will come. And I'm going to show you a little bit later on, this also corresponds to the solar cycles.
Yeah. Wow.
Part number 3, we're going to update here on atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide. Will carbon dioxide and global warming end the world in 12 years? This is what we were told back 6 years ago. The world was going to die in 12 years. Well, we only have 6 years to go, 2031. Earth going to be dead in 2031? Yeah, right. Carbon dioxide. This has been increasing carbon dioxide since 1960 up through about 2024 to January 2025. So you can see it's a kind of steady increase in carbon dioxide. Well, is the rise in carbon dioxide, atmospheric wise, since 1850 is caused by human activity? Did the burning of fossil fuels add all this carbon dioxide to the atmosphere? NOAA and the International Government Panel on Climate Change says yes. It's all due to fossil fuel. Well, if we take a look at it, there's a few studies that we can look at that will negate the thinking of what they just said.
Oh, I love this.
Looking at, there was a study done using plant stomata cells. This is a leaflet of a plant. Inside the leaflet, it has little stomata cells, sort of like the lungs in people. However, the amount of stomata cells change according to how warm or cold the atmosphere is, or how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere. Because what the plant leaflet does, it takes in carbon dioxide. It takes it out of the atmosphere. The byproduct is oxygen. That's good. We need that. So what they found is when you have a great amount of stomata cells, that means you need more lung power because you have less carbon dioxide in the air. So you need more lungs to get your carbon dioxide to survive. If you have fewer cells, that means the atmospheric carbon dioxide is high. So they can determine the amount of carbon dioxide in the air over time. And this is what the study showed. The orange line is the carbon dioxide. And if we go back to 800 AD, the study showed that we had 375 parts per million of carbon dioxide. Well, the ice core studies and everything we're told is it's never been above 300 parts per million. Well, that's not what the plant stomata shows. Then it decreases down to 250, back up, back down to 230, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And in 1850, it's 260 parts per million. And this is what the government agency said. It was 260 parts per million. But the plant stomata says that in 2010, it was up to 375.
Shoo.
But the government says before industrial age, we've never been above 300. Well, that's false. And the sources for what I'm talking about, plant stomata cells, anyone watching this video can stop it and take a look at this, and they can go back and find the research on it. And there's also one on underestimating carbon dioxide in Antarctic ice cores. I'm going to show you that in a minute.
Nice.
That's in the Tom Nelson podcast number 64 that I did back in 2023. And the World Atmospheric CO2, that's a health physics journal. And we're going to go through some of this data now. Okay, NOAA. Since 1850, NOAA says that the rise in carbon dioxide in the air is 100% due to fossil fuel. 100%. Well, my research, and I'm going to show you a little bit more of it, says that no, it's 80% natural. Scrabble et al., that was the physics paper that I showed you the link to, says 80% natural. The plant stomata cell study that I showed you says 80% natural. So is it 80% natural rise, or is it like what NOAA says, 100% fossil fuel? And again, this is the source data. Ice core down in the Antarctic, Lake Vostok, very deep lake, has about 15,000 feet of ice. What they do, they drill down in the ice to get ice core samples and then look at air bubbles within the ice to see how much carbon dioxide is in the air at a certain time. They look at the trapped bubbles. And they go down as much as almost 16,000 feet. Now, the thing is, when they drill down, we have what we call new ice. Air bubbles are not locked in place during the first 5,000 years. That's about 688 feet of ice. So what happens is there's a study out that the ice loses 2.5 parts per million every 44 feet until it becomes locked into place, the air bubbles, which means the ice core samples that they're telling us about has lost 30 parts per million, and they're not telling you about that. So we have to do a correction. We have to add 30 parts per million to the current one. This is a sample I'm going to be showing you. For example, if it was 297 parts per million on an ice core sample, you have to add 30 to it. It was actually 327 parts per million. But they tell you we've never been or never even reached
Yeah.
300 parts per million. That's false. So here's the atmospheric carbon dioxide from ice core samples going back 425,000 years. This is what they showed back 425,000 years ago. We were about 280 parts per million. Then peak of the next interglacial warm period, 297, 278, 287, 296 is what they said. But then Noah says, well, we're at 425, but that's all due to burning fossil fuels. And I've already shown you that's not true.
Yeah, that's false.
So we put in our corrections on this, adding in the 30 parts per million that got lost due to escaping back into the atmosphere before the ice bubbles get locked in place. And also a correction for 80%. It's 80% natural. It's not 100%. So here's our correction. This is what, red line is what the carbon dioxide should have been. And see, we're going to just raise that right up. And this is what it shows. It should have been 378, 355, 376. And right now, 378, we're at 425 is what they're recording in Hawaii. We're at 378, maybe 400 being natural. So they are way off on what they're telling us, way off. And this is all detailed in the Tom Nelson podcast interview number 67.
Well, and just from personal observations,
Yes.
really, carbon dioxide parts per million has been hovering between 418 and 425 for the last 6 or 7 years. So it really hasn't increased or decreased much. It's kind of staying steady right now, if you really look back. And a lot of folks are blaming that back and forth of 3 to 4 parts per million being the reason why 2024 was so warm. But that math doesn't add up either.
No. That has absolutely nothing to do with our warm climate at this time. Okay, this is a part you particularly like, is solar cycles and climate change. And this is a graphic that I just found. The yellow is the solar cycles, solar activity from about 1880 up to, I guess, about almost 2020. So you can see the solar cycles, there's a big peak in it in the 1950s. Now, the red line is what the government says, this is from NASA.gov, is the global temperatures. And you can see starting in 1880, it goes pretty good with the solar activity, up and down, up and down. Then what happened here around 1940 to right around that area? Big jump in global temperatures. Well, that is because both the Atlantic Ocean and Pacific Ocean was in a warm ocean phase for water.
Okay.
And I'm going to show you that. So that kind of skewed their data to make it look like it didn't conform with solar cycles. And that is totally untrue. And then it went back again as the water cooled down. It conformed more, started to warm up again with the solar cycle. Then I had this circled in blue. Both oceans have been in the warm cycle again, the warm ocean phase cycle. And remember, the previous graphics I showed you, this is how they determine the Earth's temperature.
Right,
They
71%.
71% of the surface of the Earth is ocean, and 29% land. So they add it all in, average it out, and this is why there's a big discrepancy here. Okay, solar cycles again. On this graphic, starts at 1610 AD, and we're going to shoot up here to the 1700s. And what we see here, this is solar activity, big increase of solar activity, 1725 to 1790. That's the solar insolation on the black line. And then it dropped off, peaked up a little bit, short period, mid to late 1800s. It dropped down again as cool weather, then warmed up again. This is our current global warming cycle. Now let's put in the world temperatures. This is what we show in the world temperatures. It conforms with the solar cycles. Warm in the late 1700s, cooled down, warmed up a little bit, cooled down, then our big global warming cycle that we're in now, global warming cycle number 6. And that is about to end, the solar cycle. So we should start seeing a big dip in the solar cycle readings and also the world temperatures. We should be going into a global cooling cycle. Next global warming cycle, number 7, will be way out around 2100, 2150 to 2190, somewhere in there.
Yeah, it looks like your chart got us starting the deep part of the cooling anyway is in the 2040s, which during the 2030s, we're going to see that declination all the way down in temperatures across the globe. So this is just blowing my mind how many certain cycles are matching up, and they're all saying the same thing. Go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
They are. Everything is matching up, and I'm even going to show you something else that will match up here in a minute. And also on the solar cycles, what does it do to the high Arctic? Well, this is something I looked at, temperatures in the high Arctic. The blue line is the long-term average temperatures for the Arctic. And what I have in the shaded blue area, that's the spring and summer months. During 2022 and 2023, the temperature in the high Arctic, that's the orange line, was pretty much average to below average during that time. I'm saying, I look back to when records began in 1958, the 2 years, 2022 and 2023, were the coldest spring and summers on record since 1958. And that shows that something's starting to happen. The solar cycle is starting to diminish, and the high Arctic is starting to cool because the solar activity warms the high Arctic air. But one thing that happened, though, during the later part of 2024 that just ended, we had a big increase in solar flares. We saw that during the summer and fall to early winter. They were talking about, oh, you can see the northern lights here and there. Well, we had a peak.
Right.
We had a little flash peak in there. So that warmed the high Arctic again. This is why when December ended, the high Arctic was quite warm. But what I'm seeing now during January, as the solar flares have diminished, look at the temperature. It's almost down there to normal. It's cooling down again. And that's going to be reflected during the next several years. As you said, Jake, we're going to be going into the Maunder minimum. And this is going to have a big effect. Ocean temperatures. Big changes coming. I showed you before, this is the ocean temperatures, January 2025. That's the little La Nina that's going on the equator in the Pacific Ocean. Otherwise, look at this, the oceans are very warm. The yellow is above normal temperatures, dark orange, red, extremely warm. So you can see the oceans are very, very warm right now, very warm. But we're going to see some big changes. The Pacific Ocean has a oscillation, they call it an oscillation. That back. It cycles. This is from the year 1500. That's a long time ago, 1500. What we see is oscillations where it warms up, cools down. Look at this, warm, 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 cool, warm, cool, warm, cool, warm, cool, warm. And the latest cycle we're in, still in it, started in about 1981, and I expect it's going to be ending right around that 2025 here, probably in 2029. They'll be going into their Pacific cool water phase. And that's going to really hit the Climate Prediction Center when they average in the ocean water temperatures for the Earth's temperature. Because after 2030, it's going to be cool water. And the Atlantic Ocean also has a cycle. This goes back to about 1870 to about 1900. The Atlantic Ocean was very warm, then it cooled down. Then we had another warm cycle again. They come about every 70 years, cooled down. And we're still in a warm water phase that began in about 1995. And this should be ending right around 2030. We'll be cooling down into a cool cycle. So what's it all mean? Well, first of all, we're going to have a strong El Nino in 2027, 2028. When you have a strong El Nino, the water temperatures along the Pacific equatorial area warm up, as noted here in the red. So the Pacific Ocean will be warm. But this is going to be followed by what we call a La Nina. That's the opposite, where the equatorial water temperatures get very cold. This is going to happen in 2029 and 2030. We're going to have a very strong La Nina. So we're going to see a big change in the water temperatures. So here we are, a graphic. This is November of 2023, warm waters. Well, there's the strong El Nino we're going to have in 2028. Warm up the equatorial area. Could be really warm.
Wow.
Then, strong La Nina, 2029, 2030, going to cool it all down. And we're going into the Pacific cool phase, water phase also. That will be cooling down the Pacific Ocean.
Jeez.
The Atlantic Ocean is going to go into its cool water phase in 2030. That's going to cool down the Atlantic Ocean.
So this was the predicament you were talking about that Weather Prediction Center is going to have by 2030. All of these cooling cycles that are going to be forming across the globe.
That's right. If they add in all the oceans on to the land, we're all of a sudden we're going to have cooler than normal world temperatures around 2030, 2031. So what I'm saying is global warming will be dead in 2030. It's going to be dead. And because this is all changed. Everything's coming together. The solar cycles, electromagnetic, gravitational cycles, and the ocean cycles. Okay, and we're heading right into the climate outlook, 2030 into 2021. Well, for global warming, and it comes every 200 to 230 years, global warming kind of begins in the Arctic as the Arctic warms up. When the Arctic warms up, you have less real cold air to filter down into the mid-latitudes. So the mid-latitudes warm up, and there you are, you have global warming. Well, global cooling also begins in the Arctic. 2022, 2023, coldest spring and summer on record in the Arctic. We're going to see that again next winter. So the Arctic will be cooling down, and that will help to cool down the mid-latitudes. And that in conjunction with the cooler oceans coming in 2030, you're going to have global cooling. And this is our global warming cycles, go back to 900 AD. Global warming cycle number 1, 200 years after that ended, the next global warming cycle ended. 240 years after that, the next global warming cycle ended. And it goes up to 200 years again. 200 years after that, warming cycle ended. 230 years after that, it ended. So you can see it alternates 200 to 240, 200 to 230. So it's going to alternate up to 200 years for the ending of the global warming cycle number 6. Well, the last global cooling cycle began in 1825, or I should have that as 30, I'm sorry, 1830. 1830 plus 200 equals the year 2030. So everything is coming together. Everything.
Yeah.
And global warming will be dead in 2030. And this is, as my helper here said, instincts.
He did a good job.
Use common sense, and that's exactly what we did. Common sense. And that is it.
David, this was excellent information. The 2030s are so important, and we've had other YouTubers and other private researchers who've also have been concerned with what we're going to be facing when we get to 2030. As we've said since we started this channel, the cooling doesn't happen overnight. This takes some time. This is part of that research as observing as time goes by. But it really does look like everything is going in the same direction, and that is a cooling trend. And I think the one thing that really sheds light on where we're going to be at, when you had the chart that said that 2042 was the start of this current cooling cycle towards the bottom, well, that makes a lot of sense too, because that'll also be the heart of the grand solar minimum. We're going to be right smack dab in the middle of a grand solar minimum by the time we get to 2042. So temperatures will even feel even colder by that time.
That's right. That's why I had 2040 on there. Is it took 20 to 30 years really for us to really get real warm peak on our global warming cycle during the late 1900s and 1900s. Yeah, I mean around the year 2000 to 2024. It took almost 24 years to really warm up, and so that means global cooling doesn't come overnight. It start cooling, yes, and we may be starting the cooling now.
Yep.
But it's going to take about 20 years to hit the bottom of it. And mid 2030s should be very cold through the 2040s, even the 2050s. And that's all in the solar minimum. So it all comes together. It's all going to happen. And we can burn as much fossil fuel as we want, and it won't affect it. We may wish it did because it's going to be so cold.
Well, and that's what the whole messaging of CO2 based warming and everyone, all of these mandates are by 2030. If you've noticed, some of these policies, they want the CO2 levels down to 0 by 2030, and then we'll start seeing cooling. But they're already telling us what's happening based on natural forecasts of cycles that are going to be happening in the 2030s. And I also want to bring up one more thing. Our listeners will be very familiar with this. In our last interview we had with Dr. Valentina Zarkova, she also predicted our next global warming cycle begins by 2100. So with you doing your studies and your research and then taking another PhD scientist who has a PhD in astrophysics and mathematics, she is also predicting 2100 for the next warming cycle to begin. So lots of information here today, David, but the underlying message here is that these are natural cycles, and there are so many. Even the moon has cycles that are lining up that are contributing to our cooling right now. And this is not just a theory or wishful thinking. This is all scientific based information. And David, I really appreciate you guys coming on today and giving our time with our people that are watching this channel. I'd like to let you have the mic here at the last few minutes. Maybe you'd like to add in what you got going on and all that good stuff.
Well, thank you, Jake, for having me on. And as you indicated, yes, we will be in the heart of the global cooling cycle, a cold cycle, especially the latter part of 2030s through the 2040s and 50s. Then they'll start warming again after that. And we would be in a global warming cycle, actually, 2100, but it wouldn't peak out in about 2190 or so. Um, but it all comes together, and we have to be ready, prepare for some cold weather coming. The winters are going to get colder and colder, except for the winter of 2028,
Strong
when we have an El Nino going on. That won't be a very cold winter. But when we get into the La Nina, strong La Nina after that, in 2029 to 2030 winter, that's going to be the entering of a lot colder winters, kind of what we used to have up in the
Yeah.
north. I can remember it greatly when I grew up as a kid. Man, was it cold during the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, especially 50s and 60s. Very, very cold.
Yeah, I was born during the Great Blizzard of '78, and I remember as a kid hearing about the stories of my grandparents trying to see me in the hospital when I was born, but it was just impossible to travel anywhere. They didn't get to see me for 4 or 5 days after the fact. But yeah, they always spoke of the '60s, the '50s, and some of the '70s having some of the coldest winters, all the snow that we once had. And again, that was during a lower period of solar activity and during those really cold winters as well. So, well, David, thank you again for joining us. I want to say hello to everybody out there in the chat. Good to see you out there, Knife Collector, Wood Spirit, Melody, UK Growers. Seeing a lot of new faces as well. Antonio out of Italy, by the way. So thank you for joining us. Lots and lots of new faces and familiar faces as well. Guys, thank you for tuning into this broadcast. Please share this on every platform that you're on in social media. This is the kind of information that needs to be out there, not these hypothetical fear and gloom and doom people, but someone who brings scientific evidence to the table, not just opinions or speculation. That's going to do it for us today, folks. Thank you for tuning in. This has been the Grand Solar Minimum Channel. Take care out there, guys. We'll talk soon.
Do you like this show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media
Okay, thank you,
platform.
Joe.
Buy a t-shirt or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.